Hello, everybody. Welcome. So we got a good show. Conference of Parties 30. Day something something. It's the 17th. The 17th. A Wave of Truth. Don't forget that one. Conference of Party 30, morning briefing, November the 17th. So it ends on the 21st? They're promoting nuclear. Look at this picture here. So the official story is 2.2 grams of fuel got out of both of these reactors. 2.2 grams. So if you were to go out on a street corner, any place on the planet, show that picture and tell people that was a 190-foot building, there's only a stump left, but only 2.2 grams got out, according to the International Atomic Energy Agency, ERPA, ONSCLEAR, the IPRC, these are all United Nations. What's your reply? Do you laugh? What else are you supposed to do when somebody tries to convince you nothing got out of those buildings? Well, Reactor 2 also melted down, Reactor 1 also. And Reactor 2 was less than a gram, is what they've recovered. For the robot. But it was a distraction, right, from Reactor 3 and 4, which clearly lost all the reactor cores and the fuel pools, 18 reactor cores, 9 in each building. So James has put out the song. It's just a very short song, but it's appropriate for the story tonight. So we're going to play it, and I'll be right back. It's best if you got headphones on.
Right beside old Unit 3 sits a shell-marked waste you see. Tanks of resin stacked with care, holding what the pumps caught there. TEPCO field 2 plans to show. One says yes, the other no. Each awaits a coming call. Neither clears the path at all. So they say, when the work might get underway. Decommission down the line, mid-century's hopeful sign. 880 tons remain, none retrieved from 3's domain. They debate what space to claim. Still the Buildington stays the same. From Unit 2, a careful shot, not from 3, not from 4. Still they work around the door, less than a gram. Still asking for
Yeah, so there, less than a gram. I'll give them credit, they got some sort of nerve. They're not very smart, right? Because if the world wakes up and looks at it, they're going to say, well, if you lied about that, and they being all your media worldwide came out and made the assertions that they're at the top of the building, reactor 4 to the left, and so nothing got out, and everything is hunky-dory. Have a nice day. Have a nice life. So why would they hide the building to the left? 9 reactor cores were in the pool. They were doing maintenance, so all the reactor cores in the fuel pool plus 1 extra one. And it's a safe bet. They're 30 years old. They produce about almost 6 reactor cores a decade. And so if I say there's 8 or 9 at the top of the building, that's within, it's lowballing it, right? They don't have a repository. So that's what you're up against. Carbon-free nuclear. So carbon-free, they got to pretend that it didn't happen because of the horror of what actually happened due to the radioactive fallout. Turns out radioactive fallout is 2 billion times more toxic than industrial poison. We're going to cover Conference of Parties 30 in just a minute. It always takes me 100 minutes to get up and running here. The last 20 minutes are usually the best. Hang on. Wait for Dana. I'll get there. You wait for me, I'll wait for you. That's how it works around here. It's crazy. There's a lot of fun covering. I never get any coverage myself, but covering Conference of Parties it's easy because they don't actually accomplish anything, right? So we've never seen them like they don't have a wall of accolades. They have a suspicious 30-year history with no auditing. Okay, so here's why it's important, right? The buildings meltdown. This is 21-day model of plutonium, neptunium-239, I'll explain that. And this is 21 days of radioactive fallout. Now, we're only acknowledging neptunium, but neptunium-239 decays to plutonium-239 in 2.5 days. And so there's 10 decays, and so 25 days. That your entire planet is now a abracadabra plutonium plume. And plutonium is not stuff you typically want on birthday cakes or pancakes or anything like that, right? Because it turns out plutonium is not very cool. It's not very useful. It's man-made, and it's typically used for weapons. I think I got everything working this time. Miracle. Persistence, right? That's what it's all about. If you never quit, you never fail. And quitting is not in our vocabulary around here, that's for sure. Toxicity of inhaled plutonium dioxide in beagle dogs. So they give the dogs, 144 beagle dogs, plutonium. So inhaled plutonium, so 144 dogs, and beagle puppies. Death from radiation occurred about 1.5 to 5.4 years after the exposures. So all the animals died. Tumors of the lung, skeleton, and liver occurred about 3 years after the exposures. And that bone tumors were found in 93 dogs were the most common cause of death. So lung tumors and liver tumors. And lots of dogs had all 3 tumors from the plutonium. So you don't need uranium and americium and cesium and iodine. You just need a good old shot of plutonium. And the odds of you getting that are no longer slim. And they're unfortunately guaranteed. So all the dogs died. So this is really interesting. This was Loveless Respiratory Research Institute, which is the United States Navy near New Mexico. These findings in dogs suggest similar dose-related biological effects could be expected in humans. So that's very suspect because it's United States Navy Research Institute, and it's got the heartless name of Loveless, and it kills beagle dogs and beagle puppies like a drive-through at McDonald's. Not cool. Okay, so there's more to this equation, unfortunately. So if you get plutonium, what happens? Well, he said, the similar dose-related biological effects could be expected in humans accidentally exposed to the same as the dog. But the dog's kidneys, it turns out, human kidneys are 50 times less efficient than the animal kidney at removing the plutonium. Not cool at all. This is bad news. Because in the first 20 days of 2011 it started, and we don't believe it'll ever stop. All right. Okay. Hang in there for one more. Hang in there. Don't leave me yet. Bone tumors were the most common cause of death. That's a miserable way to go. My apologies to anybody who lost their loved ones that way. It was most likely from weapons fallout, depending on, and the if you're eating food grown around a nuclear power plant, and they're all surrounded by farms, so there's a good chance of that. Now, here's the problem: was that Loveless Respiratory Research Institute done a lot of these studies. They also studied curium isotopes, which, if you listen to the media, if you listen to the scientists, if you listen to Hollywood, you listen to anything mainstream, they're going to tell you there's cesium and iodine, right? But the curium isotopes are the major byproducts. So every time you heard about cesium or iodine, just mass multiply that by the actual numbers of curium isotopes that were released. And they comprise a significant fraction of the alpha-emitting radionuclide inventories. But ignore that fact. Here's a fact that I want you to remember, is that it requires lead shielding 20 times thicker than plutonium. Now, because the media is going to spin everything, you got to take all these facts and put your ducks in a lineup. And you need lead shielding 20 times thicker than that plume there. Now, that plume, if it's plutonium, and unfortunately it's plutonium, is going to be full of everything, not just plutonium. But it's going to be full of curium. And curium is you need lead shielding 20 times thicker than you do for plutonium. Plutonium killed all the animals, every single one of them, time after time. Yes, my friend, time after time. Conference of parties, constipated party, 30 years, never accomplished literally nothing in 30 years. So when the show was over, I'm just in the wrong spot. There we go. My ducks are backwards. I don't know how that happened. I named every one of these screen captures I have personally named. So they don't get lost that way, right? So, show was over last night. I had 40 views. Hang on here. I forgot a piece of the puzzle. I know I've only been doing the show nonstop for over a decade straight, 5 days a week. United Nations don't have many people to pick on is the problem, so there's a lot of attention gets focused on poor bastards like me. Okay, so I had 112 people on my show, but I only got 40 views. So normally you get 4/5 of your views will be views when the show's over. So when the show's over, you get this statistic, which is terrible. It's a lie, bullshit. And 40 views. So at 30 minutes, 40 views. At 2 hours, I had 120 views. So I jumped 80 in just that 2 hours, which is really unusual for me. Trust me. My videos very rarely move past 200. So at 13 hours, I had 150. So I got 30 views all day, but in 2 hours last night, after the show, I had got 80 views. Just another kick in the teeth is normal for Dana. Have you kicked Dana in the teeth today? There's blogs out there probably. A wave of truth. Okay, so you want to see the 4 papers that United Nations, before we get into the rest of today's briefing. An interview with the father of global warming. That's meet Wallace Brocker. Yeah, that's the father of global. Not United Nations, not the IPRC, not International Committee on Radiation or Climate Change or anything else. No, it was a paper by Wallace Brocker. Now, United Nations got their hands on that paper, and you've never heard the end of it, have you? So then, of course, you've heard of net zero. We'll cover that stuff tonight, by the way. The father of net zero is Miles Allen. And once he got that paper out there, he quickly got promoted to professor. After United Nations says, give that boy a job, he's going to give us his paper. So you had Wallace Brocker with the global warming paper for United Nations. You had Miles Allen gave United Nations his paper. There you go, United Nations, thank you. That's how he made his living, was doing these weird studies to please the industries. How can we bring your footprint down? This was a public relation firm, snatched up by United Nations campaign, I'm talking about, of carbon footprint. United Nations, like, carbon footprint. Oh, that's rich, that's rich. And so BP Oil had ran a huge advertising campaign to blame you for using oil, not their ships for wasting it all over your coastlines, because they bought the cheapest ones they could to make the most profit in the shortest amount of time. Okay, so let's do an inventory on this. You got Wallace Brocker for global warming. That's the father of net zero, Miles Allen. The father of BP Oil, rather, was the father of carbon footprint. And James Hansen of climate change. And his madness, his 15-minute testimony, marked the official beginning of the global warming / climate change debate. Right, so you see that 79, that is that sentence right there. So that's the 4 papers. Hansen is insane, by the way. BP Oil, carbon footprint, Miles Allen, net zero, and Wallace Brocker, gotcha, global warming. Global warming, net zero, climate change, and carbon footprint. Now they've been beating the shit out of the entire planet. And now they're gone crazies. Now they want $1.3 trillion a year, every year. And tax-free, of course, is tax write-off. No one audits them. They gave themselves immunity. That's pretty nice. I gave myself immunity. It didn't work. Chlorine dioxide water. Okay, so Japan, the food was banned in 14 prefectures, which is actually half the country, because they're the big prefectures by 55 countries. United Nations says, because they picked up 30 million one-ton bags, United Nations said, well, they should be allowed to use the bags again. Now, United Nations, International Atomic Energy Agency, is supposed to be the nuclear watchdog. Yeah? But in order to be a nuclear watchdog, you got to be, you got to have sovereignty over a country, or you got no influence, right? So, it turns out Anna Clark from International Degenerate Agency said the International Atomic Energy Agency is not a regulator, and they're not in a position to judge or approve Japan's soil or Japan's water or Japan's nuclear plants or anything else, or nuclear waste. They're not a regulatory agency. Now that's backed up. If you go out and you start looking at IAEA's official statements, you'll always find a disclaimer like that one. UN gives Japan a stamp of approval, but it's neither a recommendation nor an endorsement. Well, it can't be. You can't give them the stamp of approval, which to the average person, well, I guess that's it. Why they're allowed to do it? The United Nations said they could, so there it is. No, they're not a regulatory agency, and that their recommendation is neither a recommendation, or an endorsement. The Japanese government has the final say. Here's another one about UN nuclear watchdog approval for water release. They got the approval. They own the ocean, apparently. Adding that Japan would have the final say on the release. So in other words, they're not a regulatory agency. Here's another story. UN gives Japan a stamp of approval. Oh, we just already done that one. And there's this one, last one. International Atomic Energy Agency not only gives a stamp of approval, it assures safety of the water release from the Fukushima Daiichi site. Hang on. This is complicated shit. This is hard on my head sometimes, too. So nothing got out of these buildings. Less than a gram. There was 2.2 grams in 1,000 tanks, though. That's what got out of it. 2.2 grams. And don't worry, because that's in 1,000 tanks. That's the official story. Do you believe that story? If you do, call in 709-740-4076. We really, really would appreciate it. No one's going to bite you, don't worry. Just call in and tell us why you think nothing got out of these buildings. Because IAEA says only 2.2 grams got out, but that's in 1,000 tanks. It's okay, you can call in. Don't be shy. I'm an old man, and I'm not going to go hard on you. Grossi emphasized the International Atomic Energy Agency report that its document is neither a recommendation nor an endorsement. And Japan got the final say because International Atomic Energy Agency is not a regulator. So what part about that is that people can't wrap their minds around? So therefore, why are we wasting 2 seconds listening to them who's going around? They're like a guy who buys a cop uniform and a cop car and dresses up and goes around giving people orders, right? They told Japan it's okay to dump it into the ocean, but they're not even a regulatory agency. Go look it up on their site. You'll see it on their site. People still live in like fantasy lands. Oh, they're United Nations, Dana. The IAEA, Dana. Shit don't even stink, my goodness, boy. Boy, you take that back talking about UN like that. All right, here we go. It wasn't too bad. 23 minutes. We're getting better at this. A decade will do that sometimes. You say you can't teach an old dog new trick. I just showed you tonight, didn't I? Yeah, it's one for the maze. Constipated Party 30, Brazil, Amazonia. November the 17th. All right, here we go. This was interesting. By COP, police officer, who's are not police officers, by the way, but are using the name in order to give themselves imaginary authority. They're not a regulatory agency of your planet. They don't have any sovereignty over any country. They get away with it because you don't tell them to stop it. Like, well, nobody said nothing. Let's keep going. Thematic focus: forests, oceans, biodiversity, indigenous people, local traditional communities, children and youth, and small and medium entrepreneurs. So they're just the whole planet. They need to get their message to every person on the planet. Over and over and over, so that when they come out and say, hey, we're going to do this, everybody's like, well, there must be the authority. We've been listening to them for years. That's how it works, right? Nature at the center of climate action. It was designed to be the implementation, the COP. That is so bizarre to put there. We've covered this a long time. I've never seen it come out like that before. Desperation? Is it desperation for authoritarian complex or something? I don't know what Freud would say about these people. Conference of Parties, and he put it in the OP is small acronyms, or small letters rather than, because it's an acronym, right? Conference of Parties. So when you frame it, this This was a major media in the United Kingdom. I can't remember it, Guardian, unfortunately. That's sad. I just remembered the name. You don't think for a second that they didn't catch that in the editing. They put that there to give them imaginary authority. That's what the word cop is meant to translate, right? The police should have protested them using that, right? It's derogatory for the police to have their names appear with a genocidal, omnicidal machine. Calls for new urgency to talks as studies show global warming. What studies? I showed you the studies that they're actually using at the beginning. Because, I'm a good guy. You will never find them showing you that. They won't show you finding them Wallace Brocker, Miles Allen, BP Oil, or James Hansen. Right? That's the 4 studies that they use. The Science is Settled studies, which is, they've never been peer-reviewed. Calls for new urgency to talks as studies show global warming may reach a 2.5 degrees. It's way past that a long time ago. You delusional wackos. And so this is what they do everywhere they go for 30 years. They influence the vulnerable, the mentally unwell, the people who can't tell the difference, who will go protest anything. And they put pictures of them up so everybody, right, it makes everybody happy. Oh, there's protesters, look at them. This is all engineering. This is all ideology. This is all MK Ultra stuff. Can countries desperate to fight a climate crisis that is already killing a person a minute? Holy shit. A person a minute from climate change, is that right? Each day. Well, how many people die every day? There's 1,440 minutes in a day. There's 365 days in a year. That's 500,000 people, Dana. There's 29 million children die every year from dysentery, diarrhea, and pneumonia. I see you all shook up over that. They're big shots. That could be cured with salt for around 15 cents a child. That was so strange. How can these contradictions be understood? And can countries desperate to fight a climate crisis that was already killing a person a minute? So there's a mental illness in the people that write about the UN. They're so in love. They're so infatuated. They probably have rubber dolls of Raphael Grossi the day he got the job. 1,440 minutes. There's 172,000 people die every day. It's 0.8% of the people that dies every day are dying from climate change. I tell you what. Well, how do you quantify that assertion? Like it was only last year or the year before they officially said they had climate change refugees because of rising oceans or something, right? But these people they'll make these weird assertions. I think they're just trying to get noticed so they can get a job with the UN and be the evil criminal that they've always wanted to be with a pen and paper because they don't have the courage to do something. And what was the point of this here? Does anybody really think that flame there is causing climate change? Is anybody buying into that? We have volcanoes spewing into the environment. The United Nations is not lying. The United Nations is not out there lying about these because it's harmless. They're lying because 80 years of emission. Like, think about you banning the food from half the country because your nuclear power plants broke down. Say it was a gas, oil, and coal plant. First off, carbon is a very heavy emission. It doesn't go very far. When it lands, it grows more plants and trees and insects and biota and everything else. All wonderful stuff. Wherever radiation goes, you got to ban the food by 55 countries for more than a decade. You got to pick up 30 million one-ton bags. do you get this, what we're looking at here? To your left, the buildings are actually gone, but officially that never happened, right? Officially, they got everything out of the buildings, twice. It was close. We done it, though. God bless America. God bless Canada. So, so like the censorship tonight is pretty good, eh? Here, hardcore. It got me this time. They don't even exist today. La la la. My last site had over, well, almost 24,800 subscribers for 5 years. I never gained one or lost one in 5 years. And they took that down when I was looking for spiders because that's simply not acceptable. Doing a field study. Hang on, wait, hang on there. Blah. Let me see. Here's the best way to explain radiation. So first off, you can put 200 million atoms on the head of a needle. When it comes to man-made radioactive isotopes, you can do the same thing. 200 million atoms on the head of a needle, anthropogenic man-made atoms. And for the sake of tonight's story, we'll call them plutonium. So 200,000 plutonium. A single one of those sequesters in your bones. You're producing radioactive stem cells for the rest of your life, for the bird or the mammal or the animals or whatever. Okay, so think of these atoms in that context. Well, they're physical, they're real. They're going to be here for 250,000 years, floating around looking for something to torture or kill or maim. It attacks everything with replicating cells. So let's put it in the context of a snowstorm. And this is going to be a Fukushima plume study based on the French government of a spike in radioactive fallout from Japan over 31 days. Now, there's many other countries studied the same isotope, by the way. This is cesium-137. And cesium-137 pulses energy 600 feet. It was 1 million to, this is the French government, right, was a spike. West Coast spiked to over, way over, like, and they even acknowledged it up to 10 million atoms pre-Fukushima numbers per cubic meter of air. That model is based on 8 days of radioactive fallout, but here's their 31-day model. Now, I want you to think about every fuel pool. There's 1,000 fuel pools worldwide, and so the fuel pools originally are brand new. They're like getting a brand new bicycle or a brand new car. They're pretty cool, right? But in 1 year, you're going to take 1/3 of the out of reactor core and put it in the fuel pool. Now, it's going to be split in atoms. And the atoms that it's going to be split in 24 hours is more than this model is based on 24 hours. So this is 31 days altogether. But the amount that they're using, which is TEPCO's numbers. So think of a snowstorm coming out of Japan first. Here's a snowstorm. Now, the snowstorm lasts 31 days on this particular model, but it never stops snowing. The snow never goes away, and it never melts. So then you would get it, right? If radiation was like that, you would get it very quick. So this model is 21 days right there, covering the entire planet. With an invisible snowstorm that you can't hear it or feel it or taste it or touch it or pick it up, throw rocks at it or receive it. Or now, if you can see it, you dig a hole to China right quick. You'll be living underground for the rest of your life. There's 80 years of this emission. Now, every fuel pool produces the exact same model after 30 days. There's 1,000 fuel pools splitting atoms. Now, every year, they're putting more fuel in each of those fuel pools. So now, they're still splitting atoms, no containment. And so the solution was, how do we trick the population and make them complacent enough that we can release enough into the atmosphere to destroy the ability of the planet to reproduce? Well, carbon, right? So worry about carbon, but don't worry about... Carbon doesn't make plumes like this, by the way. And here's another number to think about. So this number of 10 million atoms per cubic meter of air, this is day 20 or something. Think about, so that's cesium-137 covering the entire planet. That's plutonium-239 covering the entire planet. That's iodine-129 with a 15 million year half-life. That'll saturate the thyroid gland. And so now the thyroid gland is producing radioactive hormones for the rest of your life, and your pituitary gland is storing it, and so is your other glands, right? So you have cesium, which pulses energy. Each atom pulses energy 600 feet every second. So think about each snowstorm pulsing energy 600 feet every second. And then the plutonium, I got lots of this. This is documented. This is not up for debate. This is unassailable. Right, the same as the 4 papers United Nations is using to bludgeon you with is none of them peer reviewed. Was Wallace Brocker, was Miles Allen's paper, was BP Oil's campaign, not even a paper. Just there was a campaign to cover up their crimes. Now the United Nations uses it to commit crimes. This freak of nature, Hansen, who became, in testimony, was pivotal in the climate change narrative, right? With 15-minute testimony. None of these are peer reviewed, but that's what United Nations is using to bludgeon you and your friends and the 8 million species. I'm just saying, right? If you want facts, I'll give you facts. If you're going to go live in fantasy, go somewhere else. I don't live in fantasies. These numbers I'm showing you, like the cesium-137, the plutonium and all the other isotopes, you're talking about every species, every human is getting full body X-rays because of the Bromson lung effects, the X-ray effects. Because gammas and alphas and neutrons and betas, when you pulse energy at the speed of light, you're heating the planet for 80 years. All these nuclear testing, you really think that stuff has gone away after a lousy 80 years? There was nuclear wars. The Soviet Union detonated one bomb was equal to 4,000 Nagasaki bombs going off at the one time. It's the same radioactive fallout. And it covers such a wide area, right? All the clouds and rain and everything in that area would have been atomized in aerosol, ionized and radiated. And it was just the air itself becomes so toxic. After Castle Bravo, which is equal to 1,000 Nagasakis, 5,000 square miles was lethal doses because of the radioactive fallout, the sulfur peroxide hydrogen buckyball effect. What they done to the French Polynesians, the French, was equal to a Nagasaki bomb a day for 12 years. What they done to Christmas Island, the British, and to Montebello Maralinga, for instance, in Australia. Now, to get rid of all, they annihilated all the tropical paradises. And then, because they couldn't do it in their own country because they knew radioactive fallout was real, so they didn't care. And then 30 years of dumping it into the oceans, France, Britain, brutal what Britain done for 30 years. And most big, China would have done it, India, Pakistan certainly. Russia, we know it, 18,000 dumps in the Arctic. So all of these adds up. You got 1,000 fuel pools producing this plume every 30 days. So after the first 30 days, it never goes away. Like, everything released for 80 years is out there pulsing energy at the speed of light every second. Carbon doesn't pulse energy at the speed of light, ever. It's carbon, it's good for you. More trees, more plants, more fruits, more flowers, more insects, more birds, more cycle of life. And so every nuclear power plant does this in 30 days, but then it never stops forever and ever and ever. Right? Once they finally put fuel in the fuel pool, they're adding it every year. They've been adding it now for 60, 70 years. So now every fuel pool is hemorrhaging out an unimaginable amount of radiation. And remember that this material is 2 billion times more toxic than industrial poison. But like there is a couple of significant questions everybody should be asking themselves about nuclear. And then we're going to jump to the next subject right away here now. So why is almost every nuclear power plant surrounded by farms? So data centers are using, well, by 2035, we'll be using at least 10-15% of all electricity. Right now, they're gobbling up the electricity. And that's driving up everybody's electrical bills. And there's nothing efficient about them. These are the first generations. So they're the furthest thing from efficiency as you can get. But these farms are extremely efficient. The radioactive fallout never stops from the fuel pools up to tall, skinny stacks. It never goes away, and if you consume it, it's 2 billion times more toxic than industrial poison. And once it's in your body, it's creating 1 trillion times more damage per isotope. Because it pulses energy almost at the speed of light in every direction. So it destroys your chromosomes, your cells, your DNA, your molecules, permanent lesions to your organs, and the birds and insects, mammals and animals. Carbon doesn't have that attribute. A bit of hate on Dana tonight, do we? A little bit of hate on Dana tonight. I'll show you what I mean here. And I got 7 likes. What kind of weird planet is this? I only got 13 votes. Oh, I got somebody's attention. There's 8 people from YouTube at the UN scamdemic. I'm not the bad person, for being honest. High-ranking ministers take charge. All you gotta have is a $5,000 suit. Well, that's just 50,000 people to a cocktail party, basically, or a kickback party, as James says. I'm sure more realistic. Higher-ranking ministers take charge at conference of parties, constipated party. 30 years of no accomplishments. Time to fire them, I think. As pressure mounts for urgent climate action. As pressure mounts for urgent climate... Well, they want $1.3 trillion. They only got a few days left. They'll show you lots of pictures, and you'll never see that. Oh, everybody's happy, right? When like a lot of the media will show you the opposite of this picture. We'll show you a nice clean, there's nothing there, nobody there, rather than actually show you. It's not security personnel, this is the military. Why does the military need to be at a climate change? Well, because the chicken necks that are running it, they can't handle anybody talking to them. Right? Unless there's a question and answers and there's a bunch of people taking their pictures. You are not allowed to talk to them. That's strictly frowned upon. So if we took United Nations, how many subsidies is there to the United Nations? What's their carbon footprint, I wonder? They got their own military on top of that. What would be United Nations carbon footprint? Because they're going through how much money a year, and they're not worried about how they spend it. They're not worried about any jets that they're flying on. They're not worried about any luxury meals that they're eating, the caviar. So if you took the military, which is absurd pollution, the militaries, like they have burn pits for as long as their history, but they just dump through burn pits at war zones, where they burn just harsh chemicals. It's unbelievable what they do in these countries. You know, outside of the war itself, the destructive, you got to rebuild entire countries. What's the carbon footprint of that? What's the carbon footprint of spraying Kuwait during the Gulf so-called war? It wasn't a war, it was A-10 Warthogs shooting Dulram, depleted uranium, low-level radioactive material, and a bunch of looters in Rolls Royces and limousines and Porsches and that. It's equal to 44,000 Nagasaki bombs worth of low-level radiation compared to high level, which is what's coming from the fuel pools. The fuel pools are hemorrhaging curium isotopes, which need lead shielding 20 times thicker than plutonium. Day 7. Day 7 of exercise. So we made it to day 7. That's a big 7 straight days. Yeah, I don't regret a second. I'm absolutely loving it. I see a way forward. I see a serious field studies this year. Government ministers. Well, as any government that's a signatory to United Nations, they're the boss. No matter where they're to, who they are, they're the boss. From around the world, ministers from around the world, government. So you got governments from different countries making decisions for your country. And you don't got a say into it. You're not even asked. You're not even told. Or you're acquiescing by not holding them accountable. They'll do whatever they want because you won't. Nobody's able to hold them accountable. Nobody can get close to them. On top of that, we're preparing for a final few front days of talks. Well, they want $1.3 trillion. They're running out of time, right? And the push is not about climate change. It's not about the protesters. It's about $1.3 trillion every year. Whoa, baby, jeez, if we get our hands on that. That's what it's about. That's what they're doing. That's why it was all, the whole shindig was put together. All the bribes were paid all last week and this week. Come on, give away a chunk of your fresh water from your country. You got lots. We're preparing for a final few fraught days of talks at UN Slimy Summit. UN Slimy Summit, I think I should have renamed. As they bid to secure a deal that demonstrates global resolve. That's an interesting way to say that they're going to walk away with $1.3 trillion, no auditors. It was only a couple of years ago that they actually told you who was some of the people that were going there. Usually they don't even tell you that. But they want all the money, all the land, all the fresh water. And they have infiltrated every facet of your life worldwide. And people are just sitting there sucking it up. Yes, Masa. As if there was any one issue dominating talks, Constipated Party's president, Delegates, replied, everything is very complicated. It's $1.3 trillion. We need everybody just to give us a blank check and then they can go home, we can get shit done, we can fix it. Brazil's top goal for Constipated Party 30 is to deliver an agreement that reaffirms the 2015 Paris Agreement. Who the freak talks like this? Who said that Wacko, Lulu, is going to follow through on any promise? You know, we're talking about Brazil, for God's sakes. The reason they're hurting the forces is because they can't go near Rio de Janeiro or anywhere else. There's too many gangs will rob them. And if they hang on to it too long, they'll kill them right on the spot. U.S. asset managers skip Conference of Parties 30. The asset managers skipped. All he wanted is the bucks. They don't care about anybody else. It must be a screech when he woke up this morning. Major U.S. investors skipped Constipated Party 30 as fuel lobbyists dominated the climate talks. Well, the military can't exist without fuel. If you looked up the carbon footprint of United Nations, your mind would just be shocked. If you looked up the carbon footprint per se, what they're trying to do to you, let's turn it back on them for a second. If you looked up their footprint of resources, fresh water, fuel, gasoline, everything else, it's stunning, United Nations, all their subsidies. They got so many subsidies. I bet there's not a single person in the United Nations can name all their subsidies. Like, nuclear got quite a lot. Here's just a couple. They got the International Atomic Energy Agency, the IPRC, ERPA, UNSCLEAR, right? And so these, by the way, each of these authorities are the same people on each committee. It's a Ponzi scheme. The whole bloody thing's a Ponzi scheme. U.S. asset managers like Vanguard, State Street, Goldman Sachs significantly reduced their presence at this year's Constipated Party. Like, the Constipated Party is about how much money can they get the countries to sign onto, so the taxpayers have to pay it every year and the UN doesn't have to come up with any results. They got 30 years of doing it. It's a big cash grab. Like $1.3 trillion is a cash grab. That's insane. There's no accountants to hold them accountable. They have immunity from prosecution, even if they screw up and it costs $12 billion here or $5 billion there. It's okay. They got immunity. You can't hold them accountable. This story here, you got the Tokyo 2025 Deaf Olympics, but it's in a nuclear wasteland. Well, Tokyo's a nuclear wasteland, but it's actually right in the nuclear wasteland. The Blue Impulse jets soar over. You know how much it costs to fly one of them for 30 minutes? Like $30,000 or something. 30 air. Woohoo! And they're 12 miles away from ongoing multiple nuclear meltdowns. Why would you bring all the athletes into a nuclear wasteland like that? What would be the point of that? We covered this story last night. We'll just cover a couple of these. Fukushima workers, this is J Village, the same place where all the athletes are to, right? That's J Village. I get a better picture for you. I was trying to zoom in. There's a picture of J Village. So at J Village is where they had 3,000 homeless and destitute and the victims of society, the immigrants who don't speak the language, shuttling back and forth to the nuclear meltdown. TEPCO had a budgeted €1,000 per person per day to pay the workers. Which is $1,100, $1,200 US, say, per day. You only work 1 hour, by the way. But these are not nuclear scientists or nuclear academics. This is not Floor or Bechtel. This is not university nuclear scientists or nuclear universities and all of that. These are men who are poor or old with no steady job and limited employment opportunities. They were getting $100 a day, maybe. Well, the real numbers is actually $11 per day. I was showing that last night. When they reach their radiation exposure limits, which are, like that whole process is so flawed, it's insidious, really. There are two types of jobs. Either you work in J Village with less radiation, or in Diachi for fewer hours, but at radiation levels 10 to 100 times higher than J Village. Now, J Village was brutal amount of radiation there, but see, this is nowhere near accurate, is what they're telling you. It's way worse. The men from the radiation detection team who had a quick, they were just like, push this button, it turns on, and just write down whatever number you see on the screen. They're not experts. They don't know what they're doing. They've never even seen a university, let alone went to one. Wearing white protective suits made of paper. So paper can't shield you at a nuclear meltdown, even if it's a foot thick. And this, I can assure you, is not a foot thick. They tear it off after. Hardly anyone speaks. That's radioactive brain damage. Others rip their suits off with both hands. Just tear it off when they get back to J Village. Then they stand in line on a busy day, up to 3,000 workers. They stand in line for radiation checks. And the radiation checks are with 4 Geiger counters for 3,000 people. After you left the nuclear meltdown site itself. These people, and you tore off your paper suit. You still got the boots on, your hair is still radioactive, your face. But the problem is, you're getting full body x-rays, you're getting gamma shines, neutron bombardment. You have multiple meltdowns at the site. So Deaf Olympics participants prepare for competition opening in a nuclear wasteland. They took them to a nuclear wasteland, the ultimate betrayal. Why did they hold Conference of Parties 31 at the nuclear wasteland? I can tell you that it will never happen. Danish Shipping threatens climate ambition at Conference of Parties 30. The Danish Shipping wants to get small modular reactors for ships. They're like, some of them are so enthusiastic, they're talking about thousands and thousands. Because at any given time, there's 90,000 container ships on the ocean. Right, 14 of them produces more CO2, more carbon, more pollution. 15 of these container ships produce more pollution than all the cars on the planet combined. There's 90,000 of them out there. Holy shit, got 8 likes already? It's only almost an hour into it. That never happened before. What's up with that? Bear with me. This will come fairly reasonably. Here we go. Get you one way. So, 15 container ships produce more, 15 of these produces more pollution than 760 million cars, all the cars in the world. 15 of them. There's 90 million of them on the ocean at any given time, which is equal to, don't quote me, I done the numbers, it was around 4 trillion people. If you look at the numbers they're throwing around for carbon, for instance, right? Of course, carbon means more birds, more phytoplankton, more bases of the food chain, more oxygen. Nina Porst, Executive Director of Climate and Environment, Executive Director. There's so many of them out there, they should all get together and have babies or something. That'll be weird, I can tell you that much, but these are the crazies, eh? They go to university, get these degrees, they'll get hired by companies, and they'll show up as like little micro weapons out to bludgeon everybody on the planet, and they don't realize they're just an MK Ultra of UN. And she's the Executive Director of Climate, Environment, and Security at the shipping company. How does climate and environment end up in a security division, I wonder? There's some weird shit over there, man, in our country. And security of shitting. No, Danish Shipping. Yeah, that's what I said, shitting. No, Danish, you said shit. Blah, blah, blah. Blah, blah, blah. Net zero. Miles Allen would be so proud. Well, we can't have this. We don't have Miles Allen. Does Miles Allen get a kickback every time someone says net zero? I don't know. I'm starting to wonder. I'm definitely wondering. Just bear with me. Chicken eggs. There we go. So Miles Allen is the father of net zero. Right? So net zero, meat, chicken neck. I'm sorry, Miles Allen. So his paper, Wallace Brocker's paper, BP Oils, and Schiffer-Brains Hansen are the 4 papers UN is using to bludgeon humanity with. So net zero and Miles Allen. I can't tell the difference. He wrote a paper, United Nations says, we love it. Can we use it? We'll get you a nice cushy job as Cambridge University professor. The framework, net zero framework. So UN wants every country, even if you're only 2 square miles, to have a net zero framework adoption. And so the International Marine Organization, Net Zero Framework Adoption. And we've seen this show up a lot the last couple of years, kind of narratives. Shipping accounts for 3% of the global carbon emission. 15 of those container ships, there's 90,000 out there, 15 of them produces more pollution than all the cars on the planet combined. And the reason is they burn what's known as bunker fuel. So when they're producing gasoline and diesel, the byproduct is this sludge. And so container ships have worked out a deal, which nobody really knows why this is allowed to take place, but they burn the stuff that's supposed to be stored for hundreds of years. So you have 90,000 ships out there getting rid of the sludge that is very inefficient and very toxic that fall out from it, very big particles. These are just little tidbits, but when you look at all the stuff we're talking about and documented, the delay in the adoption, the net zero. I don't know how Miles Allen sleeps when I tell you the truth. So that paper wasn't peer reviewed, but it's used to bludgeon humanity. See, this is why I get the big numbers. This is why I got like 16 people on my show. Holy shit, that's a lot of people at one time. I got 9 likes. In your face, nuclear. Should energy-intensive AI data centers, the United Nations World Military, United Nations, and I ran out of digits, and the world's military and nuclear power be banned? And so, I'm touching on those subjects a little bit tonight because our planet would be a lot better if we didn't have idiot, moron AI data center. How many people wakes up every morning and wishes they had a data center in their community? Anybody? We ever got one? Everybody else got one. The AI data center, when it gets in your province, your state, your country, drives up the prices of your electricity because now you got a company that needs more electricity, so you got to pay your bigger bills because there's major big companies need to create this technology to track, trace, and database every facet of everybody's life. And so, who knows what they're up to? Clearly, they're up to nothing good. They need data centers everywhere. And hopefully we get to that stuff coming up in a little tiny bit. I got a little collection there. Definitely worrying. So the military's carbon footprint, resource-intensive military, is insane. Country signed a declaration to fight climate disinformation. So what I'm doing tonight is treated as climate disinformation. That's why I got 9 likes, 16 votes. Can you imagine how weird the person got to be to get the job to censor somebody, particularly like me? That's it, Dan just crossed the line, got to censor him. Can't wait to tell the wife, kids, sends the kids off to school in the morning, we all celebrate. I can hear him now. Hey, you screwed Dan over real good last night. That was cool, man. We admire you. You're a hero. Countries signed a declaration to fight climate disinformation. Well, everything coming out of the United Nations is disinformation anyway. Right? Net Zero is a paper by Miles Allen. Who's the weirdest person you'll ever... if you go listen to an interview, there's a couple of interviews of him. If you go listen to him, he's a friggin' moron. He's not even dealing with a full deck of... that. And his paper wasn't even peer-reviewed. But everybody on the planet better get their net zero fucking tags in their ears so that UN can check them, scan them when they're walking down the streets, make sure they're net zeroed. You're not net zeroed, then you're part of the problem. Among the signatories, this is the first, they all came on board a couple of days ago, one time. They were all like, me, pick me. Brazil, of course. Chile, Denmark. Chile. France, of course, you count on the freedom fries. Morocco, Spain, Sweden, United Degenerate. Uruguay, Belgium, shit for land, Canada. Finland, and the Stasi's. The climate disinformation is slowing efforts to tackle the crisis. Sure, you haven't accomplished or tried to accomplish anything in 30 years. Now you're gonna blame it on people who are pointing that out. So I'm declared an enemy, obviously. A recent analyst by Kick Big Polluters Out. Kick Big Polluters Out. Why is the media always referring to them? Because they're control opposition, right? So data center energy consumption surges amid an AI boom. It's an artificial boom on top of that. But look at 2035, how many terawatt hours they're going to need. That's just 35 for global. So they have to, so the way it works in your countries is if you're getting electricity, some of your money from your bill is going into a special account to replace your facilities when they break down and plus they're profitable, right? So that goes into a kit too. It used to anyway, before they start robbing everything. But you're paying taxes to replace your plants. And everything works great. Everything is working fine. Now, when you put the insanely resource-intensive data centers in that equation, your electricity now, for most countries, is very sporadic because data centers can't have any loops. They can't have any downtime. So you gets it. And all the impoverished countries now are suffering from that because of the data centers. And the so-called weirdos at World Economic Forum, the directors, some of the architects and engineers of your global control grid have deemed them necessary because they can't trust people. So they need automation in order for their statistics and brainwashing and MK Ultra routines to work. So if you took all the militaries on the planet, what's their resource, not just their money, not just, there's every facet to those military. You got the planes, the submarines, the nuclear weapons, right? But you got just toilet paper, just supplying door handles. These numbers are astronomical for each of these applications for each country. Just the most mundane things is you're talking about absurd money and wasted money on top of that. But I mean, they'll fly a big freight plane halfway around the world because someone needs a hammer, or somebody needs a saw, or somebody needs a chicken from Mary Brown's Chicken or Kentucky Fried Chicken or McDonald's or something. So you do all these weird, they're when you put all the militaries, the destruction of rebuilding, like how much money did it cost to rebuild Iraq? And how much money did it cost to rebuild Afghanistan? How much will it cost to rebuild Syria? And then the wars, like in Afghanistan and Iraq are good examples. You have millions dead, millions missing, millions of refugee camps, millions unaccounted for, millions of orphans. But what the United Nations done to North Korea was absurd. What's the carbon footprint for what happened to North Korea? They were already occupied for 50 years. So they couldn't put up much of a fight because they had most of the resources taken from them for 50 years by the Japanese. They were occupied. So after Nagasaki, Hiroshima, they were betrayed by South Korea, and the first time they were free in 50 years. And they fought for the rest of their freedom. And so United Nations came in with a peacekeeping action. Millions dead, millions missing, millions in refugee camps, millions unaccounted for, millions of orphans. And they flattened that country with more munitions than all of World War II. The coalition that went to Vietnam sprayed that country with Agent Orange for the entire so-called conflict. They defoliaged the entire country. What was the carbon footprint of that, I wonder? Right, there's 3 million children currently with debilitating disabilities because of the Agent Orange. So So what's the carbon footprint? I mean, he dumped all this Agent Orange into the oceans at the end of the Vietnam War, including off the Canadian coastline, freighters of it. What was the carbon footprint for that kind of stuff, right? And then the weapons that they were using, depleted uranium, it was of shocking amount. What's the carbon footprint over 4 billion years for that? Because that's how long that's going to last. Right, all the nuclear testing, what's the carbon footprint for that? Like, what's the carbon footprint from the Soviet Union's biggest bomb? It was over 4,000 Nagasaki bombs. What was that entire madness? Because the resources that went into that single detonation were really special, man. It was crazy. It's insane amount of people had to participate to bring that together. But the radioactive, like, what's the carbon footprint of 1 million square kilometers of the Marshall Islands is still too radioactive to be habitable, which is the nurseries of the oceans, right? These tropical paradises were these nuclear wastelands were once tropical paradises. The stuff Hollywood movies and fairy tales are made of. And the nuclear industry atomized and aerosol the majority of it, and they radiated it so much, with so much material for so long. What's the carbon footprint of wiping out all the species on the planet from the nuclear industry? We're on our way to an extinction event because of Fukushima. It was a pulse event of 36 reactors melting down at one time. You know, the carbon footprint of all the nuclear industries worldwide will break your heart. And you can do everything with geothermal. Anything you can do with gas, oil, coal, and nuclear, you can do with in 1,000 years maybe, if they're lucky. Right? They're blowing ridiculous amount of resources and precious metals on fusion and on small modular reactors that don't exist. The only one that they're building is a skyscraper, 24-story building. So it's not a small modular reactor. They're calling it a small, but it's not. A 24-story building is not a small modular reactor. And even then, it's only going to produce 300 megawatts. Well, the large reactors are only 190 feet tall, not 240. And they're going to produce 3 times that for the same price. You can't contain the emissions from the fuel pool, and there's nothing on the planet with an autoimmune trigger to defend against this. There's nothing with replicating cells on the entire planet with an autoimmune trigger in their bodies. There's no species has an autoimmune trigger that can defend against it. So your body attacks the radiation with white blood cells for the rest of their lives. As an instant cause and effect, and a brutal one. That'll, the congenital malformations. If you look at the military, some of these big planes like this one here will burn the equivalent of 1 million cars worth of fuel in 24 hours. They'll go up and they'll get fueled over and over and over in 24 hours. They're very inefficient, so they're leaving incredible particulates in the upper atmosphere, which is very bad. Your radio fallout of chemicals and everything else from just the planes. And the United Nations, of course, says they don't have anything to do with the military's nuclear. They're smart enough to get their stupid idiot, twisted little demented world out of that spot. When you look at all the nuclear bombers, the French, the United Kingdom, they're up there floating around with nuclear weapons. Man, oh man, oh man. The military, of course, is always doing drills, so they're always out there in the pristine, beautiful parts of the country, away from everybody. Really, using these weapons. There's no war, but they're using the weapons and they're polluting the environment the same as they would in a war. And we know during a war, the pollution of the environment is absolute. And the nuclear testing is the same thing, but they're calling it testing. It's the same radioactive fallout. Oh, no, but it's okay, it's a testing. Yeah, but will it kill you the same way? Yeah, of course it will, but it's testing, so it doesn't matter. It doesn't count. And one thing is the only thing we noticed out of the military was there's nothing, you can't exist without a conflict. The weapons manufacturers, what's the carbon footprint of them? What's the carbon footprint of McAllister's weapons manufacturing? It's 1,000 buildings. All they make is dirty bombs, depleted uranium, low-level radioactive material munitions. So, and that has to get used or replaced or upgraded. So what do they do with the old stuff? They tender it out, and so people, they bury it. They get exemptions for everything because they can't exist without exemptions. And now, after this accelerated weapons productions over the years, like they're on the stock market. They got to have wars because they can't make money without wars. Yeah, they got to replace weapons, but that's not big kickbacks for the people who are investing in the stock market production facilities. So now they become an enemy just by the fact they got to produce money for their shareholders. In the United States, U.S. data centers consume approximately 183 terawatt hours of electricity, which is 4.4% of the total electricity consumption in the country. And by 2028, they expect it significantly impacting global electricity demand. So we don't need them. There's no benefit. It's just used as a complete prison grid for the entire planet. Right? There's not going to be any benefit to them. If you didn't have them, they're the most, and because they're first, second generations, like imagine what the technology will look like in 50 years. Right? It'll be very efficient, most likely. But they create a technology and it's useful to them, so they want to proliferate it, even though it's going to drive up everybody's bills, and there's no need of it. Nobody's begging for data centers everywhere, because that's what's going on here. Now they want to build one in every little community you can think about. So in 2024, U.S. data centers consumed approximately 183 terawatt hours. Expected to grow by 133% to 426 terawatt hours by 2030. So the U.S. is had to convert it, 4 trillion kilowatt hours. I had to convert kilowatts to terawatts. So by 2030, and I didn't finish the mathematics, by 2030 it'll be 426. I can do it in my head, I'm sure. 10%, I did actually, 10.5% of electricity by 2030 will be in the United States. You can assume the same everywhere else. These are just absurd numbers, right, for percentage-wise of electricity. And because the way technology doubles in such a short amount of time, it can be way worse than that. Generative, this is Greenpeace, Friends of the Earth. These are control opposition, right? They're not sincere. They're not genuine. They're there to promote the narrative. They're to control opposition. Generative AI risk amplifying climate disinformation at an unprecedented scale. So they rented out a truck and put it out front, and then everybody's supposed to take their picture and share it worldwide because they're the only people. And so you had EKO, Greenpeace, Friends of the Earth, etc., etc. Artificial intelligence is often associated with ludicrous amounts of electricity. Well, like, the electricity is not heating the planet. It's radioactive fallout for 80 years, pulsing energy almost at the speed of light every second from every single atom that's been released. 80 years of it hemorrhaging into the environment. I mean, all those 45-gallon drums they spent 30 years logging out and dumping into the oceans, as that sank, because the tops and bottoms are crimped on, it collapsed. So you released the radiation into the biosphere and ecosystem immediately when you dumped it over the side of the boat. By the time it got down a couple of atmospheres. Conference of Parties 30 calls for new urgency to talks as studies show global warming may reach 2.5%. Hang on, I'll show you something. Here we go. Sorry. I don't mean to breathe heavy into the microphone, but if you spend as much time as I do in front of the microphone every day, even though I'm not doing the show, I'm sitting there like getting everything put together, because all this goes down a black hole tonight, and I have to start a fresh one tomorrow so I can do a show tomorrow night. It's madness. So we've done research expeditions for 6 years from Vancouver, British Columbia to Alaska. It's 27,000 islands. I was out there for 4 to 5 months a year by myself, getting the shit kicked out of me every day. And it normally never looks that nice. I got one drone in the water, and I got one flying in the air, so I'm wearing 2 remote controls. And don't think that works as easy as it looks. I don't know how many times I was like, oh, I got to lose the camera in the water. I'm never going to get it back. So I launched emergency research expeditions in response to Fukushima actually melting down. It really did happen. It's not imaginary. It's not pretend. It's not a conspiracy theory. And the numbers of the radioactive fallout just from the French government documented the spike is unbelievable. This is real. Just because you can't perceive it or smell it or hear it or feel it or taste it or touch it, don't mean you're getting off. You're not going to be affected. Good dream on. So I launched these research expeditions because I'm a sucker for punishment. Typical, I get the shit kicked out of you every day. And so the species to your left, I had to go back for 5 more years because they're missing. So I should never be able to get my Zodiac on a beach in British Columbia or Alaska. So we got all the documentation of the radioactive fallout. We got the documentation of the buildings are actually destroyed. We got all kinds of isotopes. And we spent 6 years, 4 to 5 months a year, doing the whole coastline. It was a brutal experience, by the way. The species to your left are exterminated. I went back for 5 more years to see if the species to the left recovered. It didn't recover because of the radioactive fallout. And it just can't be British Columbia to Alaska. It has to be the Pacific. This has to be true. The species to your left were there in 2011. So where are they gone? And I approach this every way. That's what it usually looks like, nasty weather. Very rarely looks like this. Very, very, very rarely. And so the species to your left are exterminated. What's the carbon footprint for that? It only took them 11 years to do that. I'm sorry, it only took a couple of years to do it. What's the carbon footprint for exterminating that? What's the carbon footprint for exterminating, in order for the ocean not to recede the coastline? That's why we went back for 5 more years. So a glass of this ocean water would have 1 billion creatures into it, which is the sperm, the eggs, the larvae of all species, not just the tidal zone species, which is an important, in this tidal zone, there was 700 algae. There's all kinds of snails and whelks and periwinkles. There was clams and oysters. There was scallops and abalones, razorback clams. There was little necks manillas. There was 480 species of worms. There was 5,500 invertebrates without the backbones in the kelp, the 700 algae. There was this incredible, unbelievable ecosystem, and these were all genetic superior selection in the tidal zones, right? Because they don't have an ice pack on that coastline, so there was nothing scrubbing the coastline each year. So these species are many generations. At one point, the government came out and suggested cancer was spreading from one species to another species to another species to another species. And this is why I couldn't find any out there. Because cancer, which has never been recorded in history in any of these species, but that was the whack job narrative that came out, and they equated it with like a virus. I was a commercial diver, I was very familiar with this coastline. And so I went out there to find it myself, because I'm a sucker for punishment, that's for sure. And like everything else, it's terrifying how the Pacific ecosystem has collapsed since Fukushima. A lot of these headlines are based on my research, because I was out there and this is what I was shown. And I provided GPSs of everywhere I went. And because I'd done that, because I'm retarded enough to do that, I am being censored. I am being eradicated. I am being crushed. And so what we do here is, yeah, we're crushed, but the truth is the truth. And so we still get better every day at telling the truth. Telling the truth is easy because you don't got to remember any lies, unlike the nuclear industry. Telling the truth is like a mortal enemy. Excuse me. Here's a bronze whale from a... I screwed up, probably, did I? Here's a bronze whale from a few weeks ago. Now, this bronze whale over there was 2 years ago or something. That was considered emaciated. So what is this one? This was in India. Here's a killer whale, orca, that eats 240 plus species, the apex predator. Severe emaciation. It was in Belgium. Recently we've seen in June, I think it was, emaciated killer whale in New Zealand. You see these rib cages. You can see the emaciated on the tail as a definitive. Here's a humpback whale from less than 2 weeks ago, a week and a half ago. It was about 2 years old, so it never had any food for 2 years. It looks like a deflated toy, right? I've never seen this before. Now, we cover the die-offs of the species, right? Unfortunately and horrifyingly. So if you go to my front page, you click on playlist. At the playlist, you'll see, you can click on the view full playlist. There's 52 videos of the die-offs, and where I break down all these stories. And I got another one ready to go, like it's a huge one, again, unfortunately. And the majority of it is emaciated animals. The food chain is broken, and they have radiation sickness. So there's still food out there for the killer whales. The problem is they have cancer and leukemias. Right? They have thousands of anthropogenic man-made atoms per kilogram in their body. They can't uptake nutrition anymore. And you go to my playlist, I got an incredible playlist of documentation of the nuclear industry's absurd genocide and omnicide. And the United Nations is the biggest proliferator of nuclear. Right? An obscene amount. When you see whales that are so emaciated that they don't even look real. So we're seeing all of these, just this last year, we're starting to see the most emaciated animals I've ever seen. And we thought we'd seen it all at this stage. I didn't think it was going to get this worse, but it is. And that's all species. Like last year, the gray whales, when Fukushima happened, there was 27,000 gray whales. Now there's 13,000. 14,000 died. The majority of them, we can prove, was emaciated. We covered it. The 13,000 that are left last year, when they were migrating south, had no surviving babies and were severely emaciated. This year they're headed north. They're still severely emaciated. They have very few offsprings. And They're dropping dead everywhere in severe emaciation. We're seeing the same thing with the humpback whales. There was an additional unusual mortality. There was an unusual mortality event, but there was an additional 7,000 whales that they assumed starved to death because we broke the food chain. Radioactive fallout broke the food chain. And so I will never regret a single one of these shows. And unfortunately, we're the only people doing these shows. And the censorship on me is extraordinary. And I'll provide the documentations for my assertions. I don't have to do it, but it's an educational program and I want to do it. It's an absurd amount of work. But I revel in doing the work because the research expeditions have taught me a lifelong lesson. It kind of goes back to Albert Haushofer. You ever heard the story of Albert Haushofer? He was a geolog, a geologist from the University of Berlin, back when the war was raging over in Europe. And he got that way by keeping his mouth shut. And he began having pains of conscience. He was seeing his friends and that scooped up by the SS, taken away, right? Never to be seen again. And he started having pains of conscience. He started writing about it. Got a bit of a small following. So the SS showed up and bundled him up and took him off to a Berlin jail. And before they execute you, the preferred way was shooting and hangings. And so before they kill anybody, they like to get a confession, a piece of paper, a confession. And then they'll shoot him or hang him. Haushofer wouldn't confess. And so it was getting near the end of the war, and the SS was ticked off about it, and they shot him anyway. And so when they picked his body up, this little piece of paper fell out of his pocket or something. It was settled. It was his confession. It was in the form of a sonnet. And basically, Schultz, which is German for guilty, right? Schultz. I did warn, but not enough. Genug. I should have Schafa, Unheil. I should have more sharply called evil, evil. What is it? Ganesh. I did warn, but not enough. And now I know what I'm guilty of. And so I will never look back on my life and say I didn't warn enough. I don't know if you know where I come from, but I will never be Albert Haushofer. I look back on my life and I'll say, well, I done pretty darn good. I done my share. I done what I was, way more than I was capable of, way more times. Because I'm not going to sit there in silence. I'm just not doing it. And thank goodness I done what I done. You know, thank goodness we done the research expeditions. Thank goodness we do these programs. And thank goodness, you know, that I'm able to do this stuff, that I'm healthy enough. I'm hanging in there. I'm doing better, though, now, because I have a new routine. And it's definitely changing my bum life here for the better. Looks like I'll be a bigger pain in the arse than ever before. Yeah, I got 10 likes tonight. I've never seen that before. There's like record hate on me there tonight. I get it, though. No dissenting voices allowed, you bastard, Dana. I am the bastard. I am the only bastard. Yeah. La 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 la. How's it going, folks? Terawatt heaters. Well, the nuclear industry should be described as a terrorist, right? So that song that we started off with, by the way, it was called Less Than a Gram. I'll put a link in the description. And if you're watching this after, it won't show up for 12 hours. My apologies. Just go over to James Luce's site on YouTube and just type in Less Than a Gram. You should find his site. We're going to play Nuclear Exceptionalism, which is from the same site, James Lucid on YouTube. I'm closing the shop here right now. Had a good day. I overdone it in the sauna. I went an extra 10 minutes. I overdone the exercise, which is still... Because my 7th day, I was going to go easy, a bit of a break, but still do everything, but just go a little bit of a break. I done more... And then same thing with the red light therapy, right? I overdone that one too today. Feeling good. Every day I'm feeling better. That's pretty friggin' cool, man. It's pretty amazing. Every single day now I'm feeling better. More energy. I'm more busy, more active. I'm very, 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 very privileged to be on this planet, curb stomping the nuclear industry. There really isn't anything I would rather do besides curb stomp the United Nations. So we're going to play Less Than a Gram as a closer. I'm back tomorrow night. I'm back every night until UN meeting stops. Because if they're going to censor me like this, there's a reason. I don't need to know the reason. I just know it's a reason. So have a great night. Hugs for everybody. See everybody on the next show. Don't take any wooden reactors. Take care.
They said it was clean, too cheap to meter. Built the dome, then cooked the beaker. Said the rod was safe as sealed in drums, but left them leaking out of Idaho slums. Hallelujah, being anti-nuclear's not dumb. Hallelujah, being anti-nuclear is fun. Hallelujah, being anti-nuclear has won. Hallelujah, nuclear exceptionalism is done. They chase the sun, all fusion proud. Ignore the barrels stacked in clouds. Promise stars in every socket, while curium settled in the market. Hallelujah, being anti-nuclear's not dumb. Hallelujah, being anti-nuclear is fun. Hallelujah, being anti-nuclear has won. Hallelujah, nuclear exceptionalism is done. Chart is clean, while whales rolled up beside the submarine. Blame the algae, blame the rain, but never trace the gamma chain. Hallelujah, being anti-nuclear's not dumb. Hallelujah, being anti-nuclear is fun. Hallelujah, being anti-nuclear has won. Hallelujah, nuclear exceptionalism is done. Now the rods are rusting, the record spins. Mama warned them, too many sins. Keep your son, keep your lab coat pride, till you fix the waste